Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all there in front of your screens, and I hope you look forward to, let's say, a rather unconventional talk, so to say. So let's just jump into it. And of course, we all like this certain framework that we have out there, right? Vue.js, of course, no doubts. Is it perfect? For sure not. No, but it's amazing to use out of all the choices out there. But maybe there are some features that some of you out there are missing. Maybe some of you even wrote an issue or created a PR, who knows? Or maybe just talked with your coworkers like, you know what? There is this one thing that's always annoying. And well, I thought, why not listing a few things that at least I would like to see in Vue.js, in the framework, in the core itself. So welcome to my talk. View it yourself. Got you there. Features that are missing in our favorite framework. Right. I already had a very nice intro, so I keep that short. I'm Alex. I'm a web engineering consultant, also speaker, as you can see here, giving some workshops, and I also host a podcast. Well, if you're staying tuned, we have a little AI panel from the Day2 podcast later on, or if you're watching the VOD, then definitely check that out. It's probably linked somewhere. So yeah, that will be super exciting. Looking forward to that. But first of all, let's talk about the features. Of course, as mentioned, I was and I still am on the Nuxt.js team for like more than 7 years now. Well, 6.5, something like that. I'm not part of the Vue team. It's also a big disclaimer. I also didn't like talk to people in the Vue team saying, hey, how you like that idea? It's more of like my thoughts out there. So big disclaimer. Nothing I will show here is like guaranteed to come whatsoever. Just ideas. Of course, I'm also on social media, mainly Blue Sky nowadays, doing YouTube videos once a week besides the podcast episode. It also comes weekly and yeah, open source, some live streams. You know the drill. I also have a website that I, should update at some point. So I always say that I feel like, but it's like that. So yeah, and you might think, missing features? For real? I mean, like, for real? Missing features out there? Anyone? Really curious, like right in the chat, I have that right there. And also thank you so much for love in chat already. I'm curious what you think might be the missing features on your list. I would say, well, there are the easy ones, but well, of course we have to talk about them. Vapor mode. Resumo already gave an amazing talk right before me. Also really worth watching the VOD if you watch later on. So definitely check that out. It was amazing. We're not here to talk about vapor mode. Like Evan did it briefly before. Resumo's talk, as we mentioned. Multiple components in one file. A lot of people, especially coming from React and other JSX-based frameworks, say that. And we also had a very good talk from Shenkin-chan about Vue Vine, and I also made a little video about that. So also not here about that. And of course, Vue native. Everybody out there is like, yeah, we need the React native out there for Vue. It's unfortunately won't happen anytime soon unless you out there wanna start it, of course. Evan said multiple times, sadly, there's no capacity from the core team. So that's actually a fact that was stated also in the Day2 podcast. So unlikely to come from the core team. So we're not here because of these features, right? This would be too easy. Then I would say like, okay, you know what? Talk's done. No. We go for some other things, and some takes might be spicy, as I mentioned. Some ideas are like very opinionated. So let's start with some things that are maybe not that much. Native scoped CSS, and you might wonder like, wait, is this sounds more like a browser suggestion, right? And well, actually, if you see this code here, right, like okay, scope article body to figure image border 5 pixels solid black background color goldenrod. So anywhere between these CSS selectors, you can actually, wait, scope CSS? Is that possible? Yeah, it is real. This exists right now. This is a thing in CSS. And eventually it also can be used to power scoped CSS in Vue in the future. Because, well, unfortunately, it has no baseline compatibility yet. What does it mean? Well, I have this wonderful image here. Let me quickly move me away here. There we go. Maybe up here. And we see, okay, Chrome, check. Edge, check. I mean, they're all Chromium based. WebKit, Safari also done. Firefox still not implemented, but on the radar for 2025. So we might see it this year that native scope CSS has baseline support and then also can be implemented in Vue, in a minor version, I would suppose. So definitely worth to keep it on the list. This will eventually happen when all of that lands at some point. I'm quite certain about that. Okay, but also this one, yeah, it's an easy one. browser feature, incorporate that. It will be way easy to generate native like scope CSS from Vue, so all good. Not much to debate here, I guess. How about the rest? How about vModel? But we have vModel for, well, not for everything apparently, for dialogue and details. And now I might think, wait. Come on, if you have a very simple code example here with like a dialogue and smash some vModel on here and say, okay, it's open, some content, a button that toggles that, right? And of course, the script part goes on top, but for demonstration purposes, we keep that here. You tell me that doesn't work? Well, or I tell you, yeah, it's true. Let's take a look at the Vue playground here. And I actually just opened that. Of course, the links are also in the slides for the playgrounds. And we see an error message here. vModel can only be used on input, text area, and select element. So yeah, it's not supported yet. Also, here's an import missing. Well, auto imports, but still it's not the problem. So that's unfortunate. And ideally, we want to have that, because what else is perfect for like dialogues, like toggling, or details for like that accordion style, just like unfolding magically. I think that would be a pretty good addition. And luckily, I'm very happy about it. I'm not the only one who thinks that. So actually, there is a PR by the one and only Anthony Fu, shout out, PR 8048. It's there, it exists, and it's also tagged as ready to merge. So we probably will see that feature in the future. So I really think that we will see this probably rather soon, though it's also open for a little bit, but definitely an easy addition. Also, let's say kind of a no-brainer, right? Another feature that I don't have in the list here, someone is suggesting native handling of HTTP requests instead of adding Axios would be nice. A lot of opinions there. I personally am happy that Vue doesn't ship like an HTTP client like Angular, and we have the flexibility of using Fetch API, OFetch, what we use in Nuxt, Axios, whatsoever. So I think that's a rather good decision. Nevertheless, let's go back to the slides, of course, because we have one more thing here, and this is also something I was looking for a while, and I had a very interesting research going on there, conditional props. So let's just say you have a component, and that component has a prop called prop1, and you have to provide that. That's great. Okay, fine. And it also has a prop2, and you can provide that. All good. But what you don't want in this case is that you provide both of them. So you say either or, like a really XOR, right? A mutually exclusive OR. And well, you can try doing that. Of course, if you use TypeScript, you have to type it somehow, and it's not that straightforward. But this is only one of the cases of conditional props. There's also another case, actually. So if you take, let's say, a nested version of that. So let's say only a certain combination, not like one or another, but a certain value combination of props should be okay to render or forbidden. Let's say we have an app button, and the button has lots of variants and lots of colors. So instead of saying, okay, you can mix and match them, we say, you know, variant primary, color blue, all good. And for the variant ghost, we only want to allow the color white for some reason. But nothing else. Like, we are not allowed to put in any other color there, or maybe just, yeah, omit it fully, or select only two colors whatsoever, right? So a restriction. Also, this is a version of conditional props, but just more nested. And yeah, this is all a thing. It's, well, it's tricky, let's say. So let's go back to that example here. If we would have that, then we would basically have one more step to like full type safety of Vue templates, right? Which is, to be fair, one of the benefits of JSX out there. So it would be good to have that. There's also an issue about that. And actually, I tinkered around like with that in the last days, and there is actually a way, and I will show you that in a second, that you can do that with TypeScript juggling and generic components. So let me quickly jump there. Here we go. Maybe make it a little bit smaller. That's fine. So we have one nested conditional and one top level conditional like component. And we have these examples here with like good. So the nested ones, basically the button example. And actually we can get rid of this here. That's fine. But here we see, okay, the nested conditional fails down there if white and text are there, but only white and outline should be there. Same idea, different code. Top level, to say one or another, but not both, also works somehow. We see though different error messages and so on. And believe me, it is, it is a little bit of juggling with TypeScript. And I think a more ergonomic way would be great, because mainly people who are really good in TypeScript, they might be able to do that. Yeah. For example, the link that Alex just shared in chat, it is possible somehow. And I also will release a video tomorrow showing that in depth and what the workarounds are. But ideally, we have an easy way that everybody understands without like super deep TypeScript knowledge and figuring out generic components and so on and so on. So that would be great. I think an easier and a more intuitive way would be pretty amazing. There's also a GitHub issue to track that. Also links for that all in the slides, and happy to post them in the chat afterwards. So we have that kind of, but yeah, there's a workaround, let's say. Also, it would be great to have that without TypeScript. So think about that like top level, either one or another. We can't really have that right now in Vue with just plain JavaScript. So yeah, I think that would be a fair addition as well. Okay, great. Now DOM event type helpers. And once again, you might think like, okay, wait, what's related to that? If you don't use TypeScript, this is irrelevant for you. So let's say we have an input here, okay? And once again, the template tag is first. Yeah, usually we don't anymore. I mean, some of you might. We talked about it a lot already in the past. Let's say we have this function here. On input, passing an event, and we have event.target the value, we log that. If you be more precise here, let's say it's an input event. And if you take a look at the function now, maybe some of you who work with TypeScript and events regularly, they will see already, there is something odd here. I'll give you a little bit of time to think what it might be. Write it in the chat if you want to, and I'm happy to show you in the playground in a second after you've thought a bit about it. What could be, let's say, wrong here, maybe what the TypeScript compiler could complain about. And let's open this real quick. Also, the playground, cycling through real quick here. There we go. Ta-da! Dot value, complaint. Property dot value does not exist on type event target, which is fully correct because event target, as we see here, is just an event target. That could be any kind of node. Well, how do we fix this? Probably people using TypeScript, they know, okay, we can wrap some parents around here and have to cast this, for example, as HTML input element to say, okay, this really has a value because it has that input element as the target. And either you do that, save that as an actual like variable and then refer to it and so on and so on. But you might forget about it. You might wonder, especially if you're a beginner with TypeScript, like, what's going on here? So it's not very ergonomic. And well, we could change that also here. So yeah, let's just face it, not the most elegant solution. But what if we just say, okay, we don't have to cast that, and it's not really type safety as we have to cast it. Why don't we do something like this? So going back one more step here from this to this. So we move the type up as generic of the HTML, of the input event. Yeah, of course, this doesn't work like that right now, but it could be in the future. If you might wonder, wait, this reminds me of something. Let's take a look once again. This here, input event, HTML input element. This syntax reminds you, maybe someone who's working with a lot of frameworks. Yep, correct. You see what I see. React is doing that. And it's one of the things that React does pretty well, I would say. It's a nice developer experience. But I think in the Vue ecosystem, we can even go beyond that. So let's check how. Well, the main point is that we could say, okay, we don't need any casting. Great, we provide that. Lovely. The default, like standard input event can't take that, right? It's not defined like that. We keep the type safety. Well, now we say, well, you put the generic in there, so it's not really type safe. Yes, but Vue.js could just type check the thing that we provide based on where we use it on input. So it says, okay, we used it on input, on an actual input element. It can check it and say, hey, is it really an input event with the HTML input element there or not? So there is a lot of options for tooling that definitely could be used. So surprise, there is another PR by Carlos, PKX, PR 3370, also for a while out there. introducing exactly these changes. So also someone out there thought, hey, there is a better way to do that. It's similar to React, but we could even go one step further. So also the Vue.js integration is not there yet. First things first, right? That would be great. So why not? I think that would save a lot of headache, especially for people who are not used to like TypeScript casting. And we could actually have more type safety once again. I mean, that's great. Another thing out there that we could consider in terms of type safety is strictly typed slot props. While we can already type not only strictly typed slot props, we can do this. Wait. We do strictly typed slot children, because obviously we can type the props. That's awesome. But what's with this here, this any? That's a bit meh, because what we actually want is to also say, hey, what can that slot possibly return? So now you might wonder, okay, how does it work? How can I actually define that? Because of course we can say, fine, I don't return any there, but what else? Well, there's another proposition for that. And the idea would be to say, great, we have a change here and say, we define different slots as well, not only the default slot here, just the return type and say a V node, so like any kind of node is fine, or an input element, HTML input element, or maybe a slot component with a common prop. So that means it's not a specific component instance, but saying it's a component that actually requires a certain prop or a certain prop combination. Sounds neat, especially once again, that would help a lot with tooling and type safety. Here we go again. Vue.js, the Vue extension could check that. So great. Lovely. Why not? And also it's fully optional. If you put in any, it's fine. Otherwise, well, all good. So definitely worth checking that out. There is, once again, the idea and the RFC for that, also by PKX, by Carlos. It's open there. Feel free to share your thoughts on that, because I think it's a pretty great change. If you also think so, definitely leave your comment there, linking that in the chat after the presentation together with the slides. And then, well, suspense. Suspense is amazing. We already know. Great. Evan talked about that in his talk. 3.6 will have stable suspense. Finally, yeah, I know we waited a lot for that. We all don't want to see that warning anymore. Very aware of that. So that's great. But here are a few things that might be great to have or to include. Something like multi-root support, because right now suspense can only wrap things in a single root. I might say, usually not a problem, just wrap something around, but it depends how many components you render. Sometimes these DOM nodes can make a difference if you don't need them while rendering them. It also can mess up with styling and so on, so on. So it would be great to have that. Also, improved error handling in the suspense component, right? Of course, we have like a fallback slot. And for async components, we can define an on error. But maybe in the suspense component themselves, we don't have to rely on the error of the component. There could be also something done. Just an idea. And well, coming from the Nuxt side of things, working SSR teleports with suspense is a long-standing issue. It would be amazing if that, would work out with 3.6 and stable suspense. That would unblock a lot of magic in the future, or just say amazing features. Okay, and here comes a more spicy take. Yeah, you already saw it. I know. Everybody is like, oh, I don't use TypeScript, please. No. Don't worry. I mean it like you've seen it, but it's not that bad. Just think about it for a second, and we'll go through it together. I show it again. It's all good. TypeScript by default. Yes, I said it. I'm very much aware. It is a spicy take. I know. And there are also a lot of people in the ecosystem who are not really a fan of that. But I would say, okay, why not enabling TypeScript by default? Actually, I'm also not the first one proposing that. Evan also suggested that when we talked with him August last year, something like that, or in the summer somewhere, as a possible option for a future Vue version. Because we all like people betting on TypeScript, sure. There is also an open issue that says, hey, can we have some kind of flag so we don't have to write the TS everywhere? There are also people, for example, Johnson, author of AN Signals, well, Volar, and so on, who said, it's not that good of an idea because tooling has to support this kind of flag then, and so on. A lot of, difficulties there. And I also want to fully leave that up to the people. But I think TypeScript as a default, especially that you're not really forced to say, okay, I have to write TypeScript, I have to annotate everything, but just say, okay, by default, I have a rather lenient TypeScript config, TS config, and you can just write JavaScript. But if you want to opt into that, it's not a problem. You just make it stricter or just use TypeScript. It seems like a very progressive approach. So yeah. Also, people in the chat, TS by default, but maybe script setup by default, so we don't have to add setup every time. I think that's also a pretty interesting one. Definitely, if they're not there, raise an issue. Maybe for a future, let's say, major version that could be considered. So yeah, definitely leave an issue for that. I would probably vote it up. Okay, back to the browser with my face down there. So yeah, there are some things, and the best part, actually, surprised, it's already possible thanks to Vue macros by amazing contributors and Kevin Deng, who is the lead maintainer of that library. So there is an option that can basically, let's just quickly check it. It says script lang. Of course, it's experimental, very important. Yeah, it is experimental. There we go. And you can just say, okay, script setup will be converted to script setup lang TS. In terms of removing script setup, maybe that's also something that Vue macros could test out and support if it's not already there. So definitely check that first. In general, Vue macros are really, really amazing library, thanks to all the contributors out there. Great. And also home of the reactivity transform, if people remember. So yeah, awesome. We have a lot of things there, actually. We have a lot of cool features, but that's kind of a list. Though I have to say, before we get to learning, this was mainly focused on the core. We didn't talk about the router. We didn't talk about Pina. We didn't talk about things like DevTools or Vite itself or Nuxt, for example. So all these things, of course, can also get a lot of improvements. And maybe I may talk about the features that I would love to see Nuxt. Might also be a bit spicy. Let's see. But back to what did we actually learn based on this list here, or at least what I got out of that. Besides, there are some cool improvements coming. Mainly, it's about DX, right? DX and tooling improvements. The native scope CSS is a bit, out of the rule there, a little exception. But I think that's also because it's a browser feature. I could also say, hey, support native signals when they're out. Boring, right? We all know that might happen when the TC39 will move them into the standard at some point. It will also bring more type safety. So of course, DX tooling, more type safety, which is a lot of people, and once again, people that are used to very strict and full type safety features, that could also help saying, okay, look, hey, you can do all the things you could do before without using JSX in Vue SFCs. So it's definitely a plus for all of us. We all hate runtime errors, so honestly. And most features, if we go through them, once again, they're either plan changes, yeah, like suspense, of course, some ideas, but it will be stabilized, right? Or there are lots of PRs, right? Or there are existing workarounds. For example, as we've seen before, conditional props, right? So all in all, that's, I would say, pretty decent results, because that kind of means that also Vue already is pretty amazing. We have nothing like, oh my God, how could we ever miss that? Probably because the Vue core team would have thought about it years ago and already implemented it, or at least tried it. But also, I mean, you knew that before, right? That Vue is amazing. I don't have to tell you much here. So if you're ready for more content, please follow along. I have a YouTube channel, as I mentioned earlier, where I release once a week about Vue Nuxt, new hotness, what's going on there. Tomorrow is head conditioner props, and of course, also co-host of a lovely podcast called Day2, where we have an AI panel later on about AI and Vue.js. All the links also in the chat in a little bit after the presentation. So thank you so much for your attention. Really appreciated all the comments, the questions, and I hope you have a lovely day too of Vue.js Nation. See all the other amazing talks, and see you later at the panel. Thanks, everybody. And I guess we're up to the questions.
Yes, to the questions. Yay.
Nice.
All right. So we do have a few questions. First one, what patterns do you use to fill polyfill missing functionality?
Well, I mean, ideally, I try to use baseline compatibility. So ideally, there is no like old browser support. But if I really have to, well, there are some like Vite plugins for like Vue Legacy and so on. I probably would go that direction if I know exactly that I have to target a browser where I see, I don't know, intersection observer is missing or whatnot, then I would try to polyfill it directly. But yeah, ideally, if you have the chance to do so, don't support old browsers. It's easy to say if you don't have to, I know.
Okay. And next question of there was a bracket, I just want to say, between the maybe first script setup. There were the brackets, but we can't paste those here. So TypeScript by default, yeah, but maybe script setup by default would, so we don't have to add setup every time. Wow, I'm
Yeah.
having problems reading today.
No worries. Yeah, I answered already that like impromptu in the talk. I think it's a good idea. Maybe that's a great case to open an issue in Vue macros straight away, and then just say, hey, this would be a nice macro to implement, and people can use it, try it out, see if it makes sense, and maybe in Vue 4 it might be a thing.
All right. And up next, what criteria do you use to evaluate if a feature belongs in core Vue?
Well, I mean, I don't evaluate any of these. Luckily, in a way, luckily, but where my thoughts came from, it's more like, okay, can I do this with anything else, like kind of a plugin module? Is it more like fitting to, I don't know, the Vue router because it's only a router feature? In the core, it's really more like things that you can't enable anything else. For example, I know server components is something that Nuxt has and that Vue will not support. Also, according to Evan, that could also fit in the core if the idea is, okay, let's move like in React, the core of Vue to be also server, not only client. But as that won't happen, there are other ways to try it out, like in the Meta framework that does SSR. And same with other things. If you can write a plugin for it, it's not belong in the core. And with my experience in Nuxt, it's also a similar idea. If you can do it already, then probably it's a good idea to put in a module and add that to your application. That's great. Also for testing, so people can try it out. A bit like with the Vue macro suggestion from the question before, just having a way for people giving it a try without straight away saying, okay, it has to be an experimental flag or whatsoever. Yeah, and then at some point, of course, if there is an RFC and so on, then it might be good if people are happy with that and tried it out and give their feedback to add it to core if everything fits.
Thank you. All right. How do you handle feature gaps in production applications?
Well, I think the key part here is, I mean, I've seen a lot of applications in Vue and Nuxt, and I've never really seen an application where people are like, okay, I want to do a certain thing with Vue, but I really can't, except they're using a fully wrong tool for the job. So usually, like, you can build so many amazing things with Vue.js. And of course, there are improvements in terms of, okay, performance for data visualization with vapor mode and so on, so on. So there might be some, let's say, shortcomings that will be addressed, or some cases where other tools might perform better up until the current time of record, of course. So it's also more like fitting the right tool in. But usually it's more like, okay, business logic or how people deal with Vue's composables or like misuse them. So it's a bit of education as well, not the shortcomings of the framework itself.
Perfect. That's all the questions we have time for today.
Great.
Thank you for joining us, and see you in a bit for the panel.
Exactly. Thank you, Jen.
All right, y'all. Up next, Ramona from Crypt to the Code, Web Security Explored through Horror Movies. I just love when they're great titles like this. Ramona is a developer advocate at Auth0 by Okta, passionate about sharing her expertise in front-end development and design. As a speaker at major conferences, she brings enthusiasm and dedication to empowering others. Ramona aims to be the role model she wished she had when the start of her career, inspiring the next generation of developers. Welcome to the stage, Ramona.
Hello, hello. It's so great. And Jen, thank you so much for this kind introduction of me. I don't know if I will be the role model today. I hope you will join me as well, because otherwise we might not make it out alive. But I don't want to scare you out, because there's not that much you need to do like right now. It's not as, let's say, DIY like Alex talked before was with Vue It Yourself, which is pretty cool. Get back, sit down, get some popcorn, because next Web Securities we will talk about horror movies. And I said, no worries, we will make it out alive. I'm not like the survivor girl or whatever you want to call it. We'll do it together. We will come up with a survival plan together. But before we do, a small disclaimer. I will touch on the plot points of some horror movies, obviously, because I use them as allegories. So no worries, I will not go too deep. I will not spoil everything, but still a proactive spoiler alert is in place. So you have been warned. And a small but still important content warning, because sometimes horror movies are scary, sometimes horror movies are explicit. I try to be as harmless as possible in wording, in presentation, and everything, but well, it's horror movies, right? So yeah, it's just the nature of things of them being horror. So I do my best, but worry with me, and if I'm too explicit, let's get a beer and talk about it. Well, did you see this dialogue line somewhere in horror movies? Doesn't need to be a scary movie, which we see here. I guess it was the second one. But anyway, it's a bad omen if a person says, "I'll be right back," because we all know the person will not be right back. My other favorite when it comes to horror movies is this one. I guess you know it, right? If people like, let's split up the gangs, because it's a wonderful idea to completely split up and do it all on our own, because it's so difficult for an opponent or enemy to basically catch up, right? Well, we all might be smirking. We say, like, we're so much better. We will never split up. We will never say, "I will be back," and we're not Terminator. And anyway, but I wonder if it doesn't matter if it's security or a horror movie or anywhere where we're like, "Ha ha ha, we would never do that," right? Are we really better than those people? It doesn't need to be a horror-like situation, because I do ask myself this when it comes to security accidents, with all the importance when it comes to the security topic and all the things which could go wrong. And I do think there's a parallel in between web security or security issues in general and horror movies. And of course, a movie might not represent a complete same picture, but there are wonderful allegories in between to learn what is important in this big responsible topic or field of web security, which might feel overwhelming. But as said, we will get through this. We will survive together. We will get up with a survival plan. Those are headlines, which I didn't take from movies, actually. Those are scary headlines from media connected to the biggest security issues and incidents. So there are real-life horror movies in terms of web security, right? Think about Heartbeat, which is a vulnerability in the popular OpenSSL framework, or SolarWinds, which was basically a supply chain attack where attackers insert malicious pieces of code into the Orion framework, I guess? Yes. So there are loads of horror movies happening today. So let's get started. Let's get going. Let's come up with a survival plan. And the first point, which in movies happens, and it happens in real life for web security as well, is, well, friendly professor, friendly person, friendly colleague, whatever, to the rescue. In many movies, a team, a professor, a nerd, a wonderful friends will be there to help the protagonist, like this professor in Sinister. It's found in many movies, and in web security, there's a team which will help us see the risk. May it be people like you going to conferences, learning, but also when it comes to resources inside of the net. And there is one specific team which we will need to take a look at when it comes to their advice, and especially their warnings, because people in horror movies love to ignore warnings, right? We should be better than that. So let's take a look at that team. The team is OWASP, which is a shorthand for Open Worldwide Application Security Project. And their goal is to raise security inside of web as a whole. And they will help us to find the most dangerous risks in web. For example, by sharing resources, recommendation, but especially publishing a certain ranking. This ranking is basically the top 10 of the most important security risks to consider. And as far as I know, at least in last December 2024, they were collecting data for a new iteration of the ranking. So there will be new stuff ahead. I guess it might not be that different since the last time, which is 2021. But anyway, as I don't have those new results yet, because I guess they are not even in the nomination phase yet, but I need to check that out. We will go for the 2021. And yes, together with them, with the important points, which I think are perfect to fit inside of this 20-minute time frame or the 25-minute time frame, we will craft our own survival playbook. Like other horror movies will do it. Take a look at Scream, which is a perfect example for horror movie rules, horror movie patterns. We have patterns in security as well, or Zombieland. Okay, so let's get started. Stop talking, do. So what is the first allegory with one of the most important risks, in my opinion, and in the OWASP opinion as well? And to start with a horror movie allegory, it's this one, The Invisible Man. It's a fairly old movie, even though there was a remake, I guess, in 2020. The original film was released in 1933, I guess, yes, on a scientist who did some experiments, but comes out to be invisible because he failed one. And at first, he's not that much of a fan when it comes to being invisible, and he hides himself. But then he sees what possibility it gives to him being invisible. It starts with pranks because it's funny to basically shock or prank people being invisible, but it then turns to crimes and murders at some point. And I do think this is a wonderful allegory for the most important risk we have right now. In my opinion, and in the opinion of OWASP, it's broken access control. As said, first rank, it is the most prevalent and most biggest risk basically right now we have. And it's all things related to access control. So access control means a user cannot act outside of their intended permissions. So they cannot see stuff they shouldn't see. They cannot deal with stuff they shouldn't act with. Like basically anything where they act outside of their intended permission is a problem in access control. And yeah, if we have a failure here, that could lead to unauthorized information disclosure, modification, or destruction of data. Well, according to OWASP, this has the most occurrences in the contributed dataset. If we compare the movie to this issue in a little more detail, it's pretty obvious that the invisibility is the allegory here. It relates to unauthorized access. So we have attackers operating unseen. They can do things, see things, and we will not notice them. If you're invisible inside of the movie with Griffin, he is abusing his power, and the attacker will abuse their power as well. So they represent the privilege escalation. Basically, attackers having powers beyond what should be allowed. And of course, if we have someone abusing power they got granted inside of our system, paired with unauthorized access, which we will basically not notice, it will lead us to a false sense of security while there are lots of dangers are ahead. So all the guards, all the locks can stop what they can see. And this is the same in the movie and in the security issue as well. We feel safe, right? But we shouldn't, because people can steal our data. And if you operate unseen, there's the problem that it's a traceless crime, right? So Griffin can commit crime without leaving evidence, and the attackers might be able to go unnoticed as well if it's not properly locked, or if they just happen to cheat on their privileges or permissions. So nobody will see them come, and he can hear every secret. He can see any data. Scary, right? But, well, how can we deal with that? So if we have users inside of our application doing things, we should use one really important point. We should go by denied by default. We shouldn't allow users to basically see or interact with anything inside of an application unless it's a public resource that basically anyone can work with. And then, depending on the role they have, allow them to get accepted for features, information, stuff like that. Another point which is important, especially when it comes to people trying to access stuff, is rate limiting. So they cannot brute force their way into your system, right? This will minimize harm. And then, if you take a look at the sessions you got, which are often built with tokens, for example, you should invalidate them at a certain interval. For example, if you use JWT tokens, please try to keep them short-lived, refresh them all, let's say, 2 hours or whatever you think is suitable for your users. And think about implementing the OAuth standard if you need longer running times of your sessions. So if you invalidate your tokens, the attack window will be smaller and smaller and smaller because maybe the attacker will work on an outdated token. And last but not least, you can think about access control mechanisms. So there's not that much coarse resource sharing, for example, and people will have roles basically assigned to them and they can act accordingly. There's an interesting open source tool, which you might check out if you don't want to build an access control system on your own. It's called OpenFGA, and it's by the CNCF. So it's open source, you can use it. It's basically inspired by Google Sensibar, RBAC, but you cannot use attribute-based access control as well. So it doesn't need to be role-based if you don't like that. All right, next allegory. This is Hellraiser. So Pinhead, this person there in this basically poster, is pretty famous. It's a movie, I guess, from 1987, yes. And the plot revolves around the puzzle box, the Lemon configuration. And if a person solves this puzzle box, it opens a gateway to the hell-like realm of the Cenobite life forms, which Pinhead is basically one. And those Cenobites, or Pinhead as one of those Cenobites, is a monster to hunt people for experiments. And you don't want to be caught by those friends because they are not friends to you. And basically, inside of the movie, at least the first part, or the first installment, a woman tries to resurrect the lover, I guess he's called Frank, who solves the puzzle and does become a victim. And if you think about a puzzle, which you have inside of your hand, you try to solve it, decrypt it basically, what could this allegory, this movie refer to when it comes to security risk? Right? It's on cryptographic values. Not 100% metaphor, but still good, because the lemma configuration can be encrypted, can be decrypted. The solving is the decryption. So I do think it's a good picture for cryptographic values. Which is, I guess, in rankings before, it was basically used as sensitive data exposure. So basically pretty close to broken access control, but a little more narrower. But they decided to go for cryptographic values now because sensitive data exposure, so attackers get to steal data or get to release data, is a symptom of cryptographic failures. For example, if you are having no encryption of your connections, of your data flow, stuff like that. So failures related to cryptography or lack thereof. If we take a look closer and inspect the movie parallels, you can see that the puzzle box is the encryption system. The Cenobite haunting you or trying to catch you are the consequences of cryptographic failure. So if the puzzle or your encryption is correct or you don't have any, they will haunt you. The different dimensions there is in the movies can point to security context, and the resurrection of Frank, so the goal of the woman, is the failed data recovery. Because obviously it might not work the way you think, even if you save people in this movie, right? Okay, what's our survival plan? How can we fight back against those Cenobite without, if we happen to solve that puzzle? So, well, classify your data. Oh, sorry, I'm a little too fast. I will start with the typical first solution: encrypt all sensitive data at rest. So, yeah, just do it. Use SSH. Just do it. Then classify your data. Finally, it's not the first point. Try to identify which data is sensitive. So where do you need encryption or even more stricter encryption, and do it then. You should think about avoiding to store sensitive data unnecessarily. So if you don't need any data you're working with right now in your application, if you don't need it anymore, discard it as fast as possible. You could think about PCI DSS compliant tokenization or truncation, so people can not use it basically after you're done working with it. And last but not least, don't cache sensitive responsive if you don't need to. So people cannot just sniff on them, right? And of course, if you encrypt your sensitive data, you should use an up-to-date encryption like TLS or stuff like that. Don't think that FTP or SMTP might be enough. Okay. Yes, and then we will get to one of my favorite allegories. It's alien, and please bear with me if I'm not I try to be not too explicit, because I was thinking, okay, should I use this metaphor because it is explicit? But I couldn't resist because it's the perfect allegory for the rank 3 of this word, and maybe the most interesting point for us as front-end developers. But yes, I do my best to avoid too explicit language, but it's just the perfect allegory. So Alien, a movie of 1988. In case you don't know about Alien yet, it's basically, at least the first installment is on a space crew, which is investigating a derelict spaceship. And there they are a little too curious. Take a look at a certain being, let's say it like that. And then as a result, fast forward, they will be hunted by a deadly extraterrestrial creature called Xenomorph. Well, the being I referred to is one of the main characters. It was found in a spaceship, hatched from an egg. And it seems cute, even in the movie. And it's just want to hug people, but you shouldn't be hugged by it, right? You shouldn't be the crew, because this is exactly what happens. Because they were up for a special souvenir, which we are not up for, actually. So, what do I mean in detail? Well, I mean injection. Injection is basically if an attacker gets code into your system, which will be executed because it's compiled alongside your code, which you trust. So basically injected, like the facehugger did to the crew. And this makes the facehugger the initial attack vector. So the facehugger will make people to hosts, because they will make sure you will get an egg with you into the spaceship, basically. I hope this is not too explicit. Well, it will be a wonderful metaphor for an input validation bypass, so they can get hostile code into your system by using input fields or queries or URL. There are a couple of vectors you could use. So I do think that the facehugger is the initial system penetration and a good metaphor for that. Implantation is the next part. When the facehugger attaches to a human and makes it keep an egg with them, to say it like that. So this is the payload injection, so the actual code injection, when it gets into your code and basically being stored inside of the application. Yes, so implemented into your system. And then, via the chest burster, the Xenomorph will be born. So the main alien, basically, in the movie, which will be born from the host and will hunt the space crew down. And this is the payload execution. So basically code execution, because it will be compiled, it will be executed alongside your code. And yes, the full-grown alien will haunt the system, the spaceship, will have complete system access and consume the resources in it. Well, perfect to explain injection, even though it's an alien or the xenomorph inside of the movie, and in our case, in the system, it will be the malicious code being executed. So, how can we fight xenomorphs or injected code by attackers? Well, when it comes to Vue, we are already pretty gifted because they do lots of escaping by default, which is pretty cool, right? So we already have a safe interface by using Vue, but normally you should have a safe API to begin with. So even though Vue will help you a lot because they use browser native APIs to escape like potential malicious code, please still remember to only use sources you trust. Go for a safe API, avoiding interpreters you don't know, or go for an ORM. always good to have a positive or a good server-side input validation. So not only relying on the front end, because there are other vectors such as URLs as well, which will not be connected to a input field. If you use SQL features, try to be really, conscious which features you use. Limit, for example, is a good idea to get the attack vector when it comes to SQL injection a little smaller. And something what Vue will already help you with is escape special characters using escape syntax. But just as a reminder what you did, and so you should do the same as well. So here's a simplified example. I still want to show it to you, even though Vue will help you with it. So you should do any sanitizing. It can be library, could be on your own, stuff like that. So this example could be a quarantine system class to match the alien library. The sanitizing is like the decontamination, like these doors which clone up. Process of cleaning, framework language features like Vue use. Yes. This is briefly how this could work out. Like DOM Purify is one of those libraries you can use. You have the input content on it. You can allow tags. For example, if you need some formatting, you can basically allow them, and then escape SQL characters if you have some like those. We will get to that later. And commands. And to be a little fast because of the time frame, you can find some regexes you can use to find suspicious pattern. I like, for example, those XSS, which will hunt for a script, or the SQL injection ones, like alter, drop, select, or the typical queries you might need to take a look at. But yeah, if you want to see more like the shell one, the netcat one, just post this in the recording later on. So you can use regex as well, which helps you a lot, catching those suspicious patterns. All right, so far for alien. Let's go for the next one, the blob. Well, this is not the most important point in the ranking, but I do think it's a really important reminder we need to put up, because the Blob, for example, the film or the movie by 1958, is an alien crashing an orb, and it envelops living beings, and it eats them. I don't know if you can call it eat, but it absorbs them to grow. And then it will grow even bigger and bigger and bigger, and it will become more red because it gets more aggressive. And what do you think about if you have something which grows bigger and bigger and bigger and gets more aggressive and more difficult to fight, even weapons cannot last long against it? What could this be in web development? Well, technical debt, or in specific, vulnerable and outdated dependency. Well, it's rank 6 in the OWASP ranking, so a little deeper, and I cut out like 4 and 5 because of the time frame we have. It's difficult to test if you have vulnerable or outdated dependency, but you can have ways to basically try to keep these risks as low as possible. The movie parallels in between the blob and outdated dependencies is, as I already indicated, the blob's growth. Like, it hints to dependency sprawl. So as long as you wait or don't do something about it, it will grow and grow and grow and grow to a big technical debt you cannot fight again. The consumption of the victims is how vulnerabilities can spread, because they have vulnerability dependencies on their own, which can be outdated, and then it's like a non-stopping chain, right? And as this grows unstoppable, it is a wonderful picture of unmanaged dependencies, because at some point it will be really painful, if not impossible, to upgrade legacy code. So how can we try to stop the blob to grow, or basically fight it? So if you have got unused dependencies, please remove it. Same with unnecessary features, component, file, documentation, anything you don't need, remove it so it's not a dependency or don't need to be maintained anymore. Use tools, or basically try to get some overview of your tools and all the version numbers. You can use tools for it, like versions over dependency check, retire.js. So you don't need to do it manually, no worries. But you should monitor the version numbers and basically try to get them at least pinged to you so you know you need to update something. This can be a dependabot, which is basically the most well-known way of having it. Don't ignore dependabots hint or PRs. They do have a reason. Test them maybe beforehand so it doesn't break your application, but still don't ignore the warnings. You could think about monitoring resources like common vulnerability and exposures, like the CVE database or the National Vulnerability Database, NVD, news, all of those things. Maybe social media is a good, like Hacker News, stuff like that. You just try to stay up to date to find out about security issues. You should think about, if you go for a dependency, to go for official sources you trust, so they are not hijacked, because there have been issues in this regard before as well. NPM can be a little shady if you're not careful. And use secure links. Prefer signed packages if possible. And then you should try to monitor if a library gets unmaintained and then maybe kick it out. Because if it's not updated, it will raise security concerns and risk. And if someone else is not doing their homework, you might be up for grabs as well. And again, update your dependencies. Don't remember to not ignore dependabot, which is really important. You don't need to use dependabot though, because there's lots of scripts, lots of ways how you are basically supported by NPM, for example, as well. We could take a look at audit, which submits a description of the dependencies configured, and it will ask for a report of known vulnerabilities. And you can even fix it automatically if you want to by using the fix parameter. You could go by npm outdated, which will see if there are any installed packages are currently outdated. Maybe let them fail on an error code if they do, so you have a pipeline in place reminding you of that. You could take a look at Snyk as well, which is a pretty cool tool to help or test for security issues, or update safe by npm check updates, which will upgrade your package.json dependencies to the latest version if your project is okay with that. So, of course, test your updates beforehand, have normal unit integration EG tests in place so you don't just accidentally break your application. But if you want to be really fast when it comes to updating, that might be a good idea. And as said, a new OWASP ranking will come up this year somewhere. I hope they will post some updates on that, but keep your eye open or peeled to see how the ranking changed in this year, like in between 21 and 25. If broken access control is still number one, we'll see. But anyway, at last, let me add some general rules as well. So without a horror movie allegory, but horror movies has pattern as well, so is it with security issues. So stay as a team, don't feel alone in this. Tackle issue with the community, go to conferences, contribute, and tell frameworks. I guess the email address of Vue is security@Vue, something like that. So if you see a security issue, let them know so they can work on it. Be a team, don't split up. Take care of your batteries. So if you, for example, have anti-batteries in phone or torch, it was never a good idea in horror movies to go further. In security, that means nurture your tools and software in use, so you are not caught empty-handed. Double check if the killer was defeated, because I guess many of us are annoyed if they don't do it and then they will get into an ambush in a horror movie. For security, that means test your code and fixes, log everything you need to know so an attacker will not go unnoticed. And at the other hand, you don't destroy your system by going for the latest changes. And take your professor's advice seriously. Don't ignore red flags or warnings. In horror movies, that often lead to people demise. And in web security, it's important as well. So when it comes to OWASP advice, when it comes to new security issues being announced inside of your dependencies, listen to those things. Listen to best practices. be open to learn, be open to take a look at conference talks like this introductory one, but maybe even more advanced one which might follow up. Let's learn together, let's be a team, don't split up. Don't say I'll be back, we're in it together, and together we will survive this horror movie of security issues. My name is Ramona. I'm a developer advocate at Auth0, and if you want to learn about a project I'm working on, scan this QR code. But apart from that, I guess that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ramona. We do have some
Give me
questions
a second.
for you.
I cannot hear you right now, but I guess now it's fine.
Can you hear me now?
Wonderful.
Perfect. Yay. We do have a couple questions for you.
Please.
The first one is, what are the most commonly overlooked security issues in Vue apps?
So I can only tell from my experience right now. And I'm so happy Vue helps us when it comes to injection with all the escaping they do by native browser APIs. However, broken access control is still a really important point. It's not like Vue specific, because I do think Vue shouldn't take care of everything, right? It's a framework. And especially if you implement loads of features, it will take away performance. So please keep broken access control inside of your mind. Oversight is the most important point as well. Think about how to build authentication or use a tool.
Thank you. Okay, and next question. How to host their website in GitHub without exposing their private key. Do you have any recommendations? They don't want to purchase hosting. How can they encrypt or obfuscate their secrets after compiling their site?
This is a really important question, because I hate if people commit their keys or stuff like that. I'm like, oh, and you don't need to do it. So think about going for environment variables like .env and use a git ignore, so it will not be used for being pushed. And of course, you will have a sample.env file, which just shows where those things are if people want to use it as well. But if you have a .env local file, which will actually store your keys, put it into a git ignore. And I do think, at least it's a thing by Netlify, I guess, but I'm not completely sure because I don't use it that much. GitHub Pages will have a secret function when it comes to environment variables, so they are not exposed. I do know that that's the case at Netlify, and I do think they have still some free plans, so you don't need to pay for hosting. If a hoster doesn't have a secret environment variable feature, I wouldn't use them personally.
And I believe I've used it recently on Netlify, and I used to use it the same thing on Vercel too, just to name another one. But that's a great call out. Thank you. That's all the questions we have for you today. Thank you for joining us today, Ramona.
Thank you so much for having me. And in case you got any questions, you can find me on all social media platforms like Blue Sky, LinkedIn, Twitter. So if you still come up with questions, just let me know.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, y'all, let's learn a little bit more about Vue School Premium. Vue School now offers more than 130 hours of video course content covering Vue and the broader ecosystem. With more content added each week, that library of courses is just growing and growing. Did you know that NASA studies Vue at Vue School, which is pretty cool, Apple developers too, and many more from other prominent organizations? During Vue Nation, Vue School's yearly plan is 50% off, giving you access to hundreds of hours of expert training for only $12.50 a month, the normal plan being $25 per month. Whether you're just starting out or brushing up on advanced topics, there's something for everyone, including technologies like Tailwind, TypeScript, Pina, Nuxt, and many more. Head over to vue.school/VN25 and grab the deal while it lasts. And up next, we have Alexander Opolik. What is local first web development and how can we build it with Vue? Alexander is a Vue developer with 6 years of experience in addition to enjoying Vue at work. He also likes writing blogs and posts for his own blog. Welcome to the stage, Alexander.
Yeah, hello everyone. It's really an honor to be here, a speaker at Vue Nation. I think we had many awesome talks already, and I hope I can continue with that. So today I want to introduce you to the awesome world of local first web development. And since we are at Vue Nation, of course, I also need to tell you how we can build that with Vue. But before we dive deeper into this topic, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Alexander Opalic. I work as a senior full stack developer at Otto Payments. And yeah, I now have more than 7 years of experience. And I live in Germany, near Munich. And yeah, I also write blog posts, mostly related about Vue. So yeah, if you want, after Vue Nation, you can check them out. Or you can also follow me or write me a DM if you have any questions. I'm always happy to answer them. But now, before I explain what local first means, we need to understand how we currently build applications. So currently, you see that on the left side, we have a front end. And on the front end, yeah, we use Vue. And then let's imagine we have a to-do app. A user wants to add a new to-do. What is happening is that we make a request to the backend. Then the backend stores the data into a database. And then we wait. And then when the backend says, OK, everything was working, then we show it in the application. So this is currently how we build applications. But there are some problems to that. So the first problem is that it doesn't work offline. Another problem is that the user is not really in control of his data. And then also performance can be a problem. In my experience, most of the time, it was never an issue with Vue or that the front end was too slow. It was always that some backend API was too slow. They were doing some crazy SQL joins. And then there was a problem. And then also complexity. So with complexity, I mean that even a simple question on how to validate something is not so clear, because you then ask yourself, should we validate on the front end? Should we validate on the back end? Should we do validation on both places? So it could be that sometimes we duplicate business logic, both on the front end and the back end. And this is where local first comes. And I like this definition from Martin Kleppmann that he gave last year on the local first conference. So in local first software, the availability of another computer should never prevent you from working. So this sums up the whole local first idea. But then maybe you say, okay, what does this even mean? Yeah, so in 2019, Ink and Switch, also together with Martin Kleppmann, they released this important paper where the name local first also was first mentioned, and they defined 7 principles. And now I will explain you the principles. The first principle is that we have no spinners. Yeah, this is important. Everything should feel fast, instant local operations. Then the other important principle is it should work on multiple devices. So it should work on the web, but then also on your smartphone if you have a to-do application, for example. And ideally, it should also work offline. And collaboration is also important. So something like Google Docs should also work in a local first way. And then maybe the most, the hardest principle is the long now principle. Because this means that, let's say you have a to-do app, you use a service, and then the company decides we don't make any money more out of that, and then you can't use your to-do app anymore because you always need to store data to the backend. And in a local first way, you can still use your application. Yeah? So this would be either that offline you can still use it, and you could even use it on multiple devices. And this is also the main difference to offline first, if you ever heard about that. And then, yeah, privacy and security is important, as we learned in the awesome talk before. It's also an important concept of local first principles. And the user should also be fully in control. Yeah, so you have a to-do app, and then if the user decides to go to another to-do app because it's better, it would be nice if he could transfer his data in a way, so he's not trapped in one app. And yeah, if you are interested more in learning about local first, I highly recommend you to check out the paper from them. And yeah, what does this mean then architecture-wise? So now this is, I think, one of the most important things to understand is in local first, we always store data, as the name says, locally. And then under the hood, with the sync engine, the data gets to a backend, and then the backend stores it to a database, and then it works. Yeah. So this is really the main difference in comparison to the traditional way, where we first made an API request and then we were waiting before we show it to the UI. We now can immediately show the data, and the sync engine will send the data to a backend, and it will store it on a database. And yeah, the most complex thing about the local first approach, if you build it yourself, is then the sync engine. Yeah. Then I hope I could convince you that local first is a good idea. And yeah, since we all love Vue, then you ask me, yeah, how can we do that with Vue? And I think there are three main ingredients that we need. So the first one is we should convert our Vue application into a progressive web app. The simple reason is that it is easier to make it work offline, and it has also nice benefits because a user could download the application and then it feels more native. And the other important aspect is we need a local database. And since we use Vue, we have a browser, so maybe use Chrome, and there we have some options. Probably most of you have worked with a local storage, but local storage is not good enough. So there are better options like IndexedDB, or what we also could even do, we could use SQLite and WebAssembly and the browser. So we have some options there. And then, as I said, we need something that syncs the data under the hood to a database. And this is also the most complex thing if we want to do it ourselves. And I think with these three ways, we can convert an application into a local first app. And then, if you want, I also wrote some blog posts on how to convert the application into a progressive web app, or how to use SQLite with Vue. So you can check that out. I won't talk about that in this talk, but yeah, just that you know that there's something out there. And then, before I show you some actual code, there are also two questions I think we need to answer. So we want to build a local first application with a central server. Then the first question is, how much data can we store on each device? So when you have a to-do app, it's probably totally fine that we store all the data. Or if you have a habit tracking app, it's also fine. But let's say you want to build something like GitHub in a local first way, then you can't store all the possible issues out there. So we need a partial data set. And then the other question is, depending on your business and how complex collaboration is, how you want to resolve conflicts. So there are some easy ways to resolve that, but there are also some more advanced and complex ways. And yeah, we need to think about that. Yeah. And then what you could also do, you could build your own sync engine. This is what Linear did. And yeah, the CTO of Linear talked about it in this YouTube video, which I can highly recommend. So basically, Linear is kind of doing what Jira is doing, but it's much faster because they use many local first aspects, especially that it can work offline. But for their unique case, they built their own sync engine. Yeah. And before I show how I built my little local first POC, we have also many options out there. And in my personal opinion, this is maybe one problem of building local first applications, because we have so many options out there. So it's kind of hard to directly know which you should choose. Yeah, that's why on my talk for my little POC, I decided to use Day2.js. So as it says in the documentation, a minimalistic wrapper for IndexedDB. So if you just want to work better with IndexedDB, you can also use Day2.js. But the cool thing is they have a cloud solution. So if you don't want to create your own database, your own authentication system, you can just use the one from Day2.js. But also, if you already have maybe a Postgres database, we don't need to use the cloud solutions, but we can still get benefit out of Day2.js, which I also like. And then I think it's always important, if you want to explain something complex, to build a to-do app. This is what I did. So on the left, you see I built a little to-do application where we can add to-dos, we can delete to-dos, we can also sign in, sign out. And this is how it looks. And this is the project structure. So the most important files. So first we have our components folder. So UI, I just use Shade CDN as a UI library, so that have elements like base button and so on. Then we have a to-do list component. The to-do list component is doing the main logic. We have an out guard, which is responsible for the login, logout that you saw before. Then we have a composable. There is our main business logic. Then we have one page that is using the to-do list component. And then all the Day2.js related code is in one file, which is then in the end used by the composable. And then app.view is using the out guard so that every route is under login and logout. And then let's imagine we already have a Vue application built and we now want to add Day2 and the cloud support. This is how we do it with npx Day2 cloud create. Day2 then asks us for an email. This is kind of the admin of this. And then we need to type in a password. Then Day2.js will create the database. And now what is also important, we get a JSON file where the URL is, which we then later need. And we get also a key file that has some secrets. And this is important when you want to do admin operations. And also important, don't commit that to Git. So this needs to be included in git ignore. And then, when we want to work with it locally, because if we don't do that, we get a course error. So we need to whitelist the URL. And then the last thing is we need to install Day2 and the Day2 Cloud add-on. And then this is the Day2.js file. So we import Day2. We also import Day2 Cloud. Then we create a new Day2. And as I said, we are not forced to use the cloud. We could also just use it to work better with the IndexedDB. We could also include our own server. But I, for my little POC, decided I want to build something fast that works. So that's why I use the Day2 Cloud. And then here we define how our to-do should look. So it's really simple. We have a title, we have a completed state, and we also have a created state. And then here, also important, If we would just build it that it only works locally, then it's fine if we use the ++ ID, because what Dexy is then doing for us, if we add a new to-do, that the ID will be auto-incremented. But if we want to sync it to the cloud, it's important to add the add ID, because then Dexy.js will always create a unique ID. And then the last thing, we need to add the URL that we created in the step before. And also, yeah, the require out is optional. So this basically means that a user can only do operations when he is logged in. But you could also set it to false, and then a user doesn't have to be logged in to sync something. He can do that later. And then now the core composable. So I'm always a fan of extracting business logic into a composable and not having it in the component itself, even if only one component is using that. And that's why here we have use to-dos. We import ref, DTB. And then the first interesting thing, we import the use observable and also the live query. And this, in the end, is then making the to-dos reactive. So this means when you, on the browser, you have opened the to-do app and you're also on your smartphone and you do something on your smartphone, so you add a new to-do, you will then directly see it on the browser. So this is really nice with not so much code. We get this out of the box. And then we also just have some simple helper computed, because as you saw, I show the pending to-dos and also the completed to-dos. And then the first CRUD operation. So here we can add new to-dos. We use the TB to-dos add, and then we add a title, and we also create add the current timestamp, which we then need to order the to-dos. And this is what Dexy.js is doing. And we also need to remember Dexy.js is doing two things here. First, it stores the data against our IndexedDB. And then under the hood, when the user has internet, it will also sync it to the cloud. And then, we need a toggle to do and a delete to do method. But there's really nothing special here. And then any Vue component can then use this composable, and the Vue component itself doesn't even care what happens under the hood. And then also one important component is the outguard component. There we import the base UI elements and also some things from Dexy. And then with the use observable, we have a reactive user. So this component then knows if a user is logged in or if he is logged out. And we also have a handle login function, which is in the end using the login from Dexy.js. And then if a user is logged in, we go to the VLs part. And this has a slot. So this basically means that the page itself will render the content. And if a user is not logged in, then we show him with some UI here, please, you have to log in to do something. And then you see here, this is then used by the app.vue. So we have the outguard and then the router view. And as I said, we only have one page, and this one page is using the to-do list component. And now, how does this look on this diagram? So for us, the only thing where we change code is under the Vue application. And the Dexy.js layer is handled by Dexy.js. So ideally for us, we don't have to think so much how Dexy.js is storing it into IndexedDB and how it's syncing the stuff. We can just focus on the use to-dos and focus on the business logic there. and just update a ref and don't really care so much what Dexy there is doing, and just hope that it works, of course. Yeah, that's the diagram. And then, yeah, if you want to understand it better, because I think it's also easier if you look into the source code maybe, or you build your own POC with Dexy or another sync engine, you can check out my GitHub, or also I wrote a blog post about that, where I also explain deeper how conflict resolution works and so on. Yeah. But then, yeah, you probably also ask me, yeah, should I not now go to my PO and say we need to rebuild our application? It needs to be local first. And I think, no, it's not every application can be built in a local first way, or should be built, because, yeah, if you have a typical e-commerce site, I think it doesn't make so much sense that it needs to work offline. Or if you, yeah, have a game where multiplayer is important, why should it work offline? Or if you need to see live data, like weather or stocks and so on, it also doesn't need to be a local first way. But where I think we should have more local first applications is for something like a habit tracker, or, yeah, to do, or notes, or if you go to the gym, you need to track there some data. Also for tools like editors, or when you want to write something, or something like Jira would also be nice if it would be work in a local first way, that, yeah, if you're on the train, you can still work, and then you have internet connection again, and then it will just sync. So I think that there are definitely many applications where local first would help. And always keep in mind, one thing that is local first is doing out of the box is that the application will be fast. And you can't build an application faster than building it in a local first way, because we store everything always locally against database first. Yeah, we never wait for the backend API to do something. Yeah, and this was my little introduction about local first. I hope it was interesting. And also, if you want to know more, local first, it's a really nice community, I think. They also have a website. They also have online meetups. Last year they had their first conference. So I think that this movement will start to grow and grow, and I hope it will grow, because I see many benefits there. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. We do have a few questions for you. How do you manage offline capabilities effectively?
Yeah, I think the first step is that we need a local database. So as I said, when we use Vue, we can use the index DB, for example, and then we store the data, and then we need a sync engine that is storing that. And also one way with a progressive web app, and we also get nice benefits out of that, because then we don't always have to download all the CSS and all the JavaScript stuff. This is something that progressive web apps give us out of the box, and also other things. Yeah.
Thank you. And last question, how do you handle storage limitations in local first apps?
Yeah, this is a good question. And I think this problem is not solved yet for the browser, because if you use IndexedDB, for example, on Safari, I think after 7 days, if you don't open the web application, Safari would just delete your data. I think this is different than on Chrome. So this is, of course, a problem. This is also the difference to native applications, where we don't have this problem. Yeah. So if you download from the Play Store to do app, you don't have to think about that. And then the size, I think the size itself is not a problem, because if you use IndexedDB, you get, I don't know, 70% or 80% with Chrome, depending how big the storage of your device is. So I think this is not a problem. But what is a problem that if you don't use it for one week, on your use Safari, you're not sure if the data is still there.
Fair enough. Well, thank you for joining us so much. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you also.
All right, y'all. Let's talk a little bit about giveaways before we go